So finally, we got to the most interesting tool of the Burp suite. And actually, in this section, I will talk about two modules, the Intruder and the Comparer, which is a really simple tool, but you often use them together. So that's why I choose this place to introduce the Comparer and not in a separate section or something. But first, we are going to start with the Intruder. The Intruder is basically the automated fuzzer where you can set the values how you want to test or fuzz various inputs. So we are going to work with a vulnerability in WebGoat, and that's the authentication flows and forgot password. You know, lots of applications have this feature that you can, if you forgot your password, you can request a new password, or there are different methods to solve this problem. Either that you put in your email address and then you get a password reset email, or you get a new password in email, or there is some security question where if you can answer that, then you're allowed to change your password, etc. So in WebGo, there's also this feature. So here there is a possibility to give your username. Actually, it's written in the description that your username is WebGoat, but let me just check what happens if I put in a non-existing username. Yeah, you get an error message. Did I put in the correct username, which is WebGoat? And I submit it. And there, they choose the security question method. So you have to put in your favorite color. Let's try green. Oh, it's not green. But what's happening here is that you have a finite number of possibilities here because there are a finite number of well-known colors. So what we want to do somehow is to have a list of colors and then test all these colors with a request and try to find out somehow from the response which one was the correct. You could use the repeater here and test every single color by yourself, which would actually still work with the repeater because there are not so many colors usually. But if the scenario is more complicated, like the set of possible answers is like tens or hundreds or thousands, then you wouldn't be able to test that with the repeater manually. So in this case, you can use the intruder. So what we are going to do is we are going to put here, yeah, I can just try it again, like with black, and it's wrong again. Now let's go back to Burp and go to the proxy, and I will look for that request. Yeah, it's that. You see here that the color was black, and there is also another parameter called submit, which is not that interesting. So we want to test this request. So we'll say right click and send to intruder. Now your request appears in the intruder. Just a quick hint, you can give names to your tabs. So I can name this password forget. It's pretty cool. I use it a lot in the repeater because I test like user creation or user approval or login, and then I can name all these tabs, and then if I come back, I will see that, oh, this is the request to create a user, and this is the request to log in, etc. So if you come back later, it's easier. So here in the intruder, what you have here is the attack target, which is there if you send the request here from some other modules, and then you come to the positions, and then as you can see, here's your request, and Burp already marked you the positions, the possible positions. So you can test anything here, but Burp tries to find all the parameters in the request. But if you don't like it, then you can just like say clear, and like if you there are some attacks against this host header, then you can just say add, or you can say auto again, and then it will be marked as it was. Now there's another setting here called attack type. Since I keep forgetting what these attack types are, I will always have to Google it, so I will just show that to you as well. So Burp attack type, Intruder, Sniper. So you can see there are quite a few documentations here. We could just go to the Portswigger website and check the definition there. So Sniper is the most basic one. What happens there is you select one payload list, and if you have different positions, what you test. So, for instance, here we have 5 positions to test. And we will select. If you come here to the payload, there is just one payload set, and then this payload set will be used for each position after each other. So we have 5 positions here. If our payload list is 10 elements long, then that will create 5 times 10 requests. So 50 requests will be sent. Then the battering ram is also one payload set, but this payload set will be applied on these positions simultaneously. So like the first request will have the first value from the payload list in each places. So in case you have a 10 long list of payload and these 5 positions, then you will just send 10 requests. And there is the pitchfork. With the pitchfork, you can define different payload lists for all the positions in your request. And these different payload lists will be applied in the position simultaneously again. So that means that in every request, the all payload lists will be iterated to the next one. And lastly, the cluster bomb is, again, you have different payload list for all the positions you mark, but all permutation of these payload lists will be tested with this request. So I think this is the most performance-intensive test because here, since all permutations will be tested, it will send a lot of requests. We will just talk about the sniper. Actually, that's what I use most of the time because I prefer to test each parameters separately, because then you see exactly what caused the problem. Like if you're fuzzing all of them at the same time and you get an error message, you don't know which parameter actually caused the error. So you will have to go back to the repeater or something and start like testing out which parameter caused the problem. But if you're doing the sniper, then you will see exactly which parameter causes the problem because you only test one at a time. But for instance, if your target application is really slow and you cannot afford to send like 5,000 requests, but you still want to test all the parameters, Then you might choose something else, which will result in less requests, but still testing everything. But after that, you will have to still work to find out what the problem exactly was. But now we are going to use the sniper, and we don't want to test all these things here. So I will just clear out the whole page, and then I want to test this color. So I will just put add. Then we go to the payload. Now we have to tell what kind of values we want to test as a color parameter. Now, as before, I always told you what's the difference between the Burp Suite Free Edition and the Pro Edition, and there's a difference here as well. So there's this payload type called simple list. In the Pro Edition, there are like predefined lists, like list to test cross-site scripting, list to test SQL injection, etc. You can build these lists by yourself and use it from a file or something. But it's pretty handy that there are these default lists for also for path traversal or general fuzzing and things like that. So quite a few things, usernames, passwords, whatever. So it could be useful. But as you can see, there are quite a few possibilities here. Dates, random numbers, characters, whatever. Like numbers could be useful if you see that when you're using loading the profile of a user, then in the URL there is this number telling probably the ID of the user. So you can just test whether you can load the profile of other users, and then you say that you want to test it from 1 until 10,000 and step 1, and then there will be 10,000 requests. So you also want to say here minimal fraction digits null and maximal fraction digits null, and then you just use integers. So then you will test the user IDs from 1 to 10,000. That's pretty straightforward, but that's not what we want to do right now, because we want to do colors. For that, we still say simple list, because I created a list myself. As you can see, I put quite a few colors here and then some random text. So I will just copy this list and come back here and say paste. So that's how you can use your own list, and you can also put it here, but if you're maintaining your own list, for instance, for cross-site scripting or for SQL injection, then it will be easier just to paste it here all the time. There are some other options what you can do that we don't want to try now. You can experiment with this payload processing, and this is just a simple thing to URL encode these characters in the request. That's usually useful. So as you can see, we're testing one parameter and there are 13 values, so there will be 13 requests sent. So let's start the attack. For that, we have to come here to Intruder and say start attack. We get this warning window because the speed of Intruder is limited in the free edition. You don't get this problem in the Pro edition. So let's start. It opens a separate window, and you see that there were how many requests were sent, and here are all the responses. The first one is always a baseline request, so that's the original request, which was with the color black. You might ask, how do we figure out which was interesting? What I usually do, because we have now 13 requests, but in another scenario you could have like thousands of requests here, and you don't want to check out all the requests and responses to figure out which was interesting for you. What I first do is I order the list by length, because there you will see the changes. Like usually you get when you're testing, you get lots of error messages, and they are usually the same, so the length will be the same. So like in a fuzzing, like 80% of the responses are the same error message, and you will see that from the response length. So you will start going down and like check out what's this, look through the response. Okay, this is an error message, and then you will know that all other responses which have the same length are the same error message. And this way you kind of cluster the responses based on the length, and that will help you figure out the different clusters, what they mean. Like sometimes you get a different error messages, and that's another cluster, etc. It also works for us because if you look at here, like most of the requests except one has the same size, and we can see that that's the same size as the baseline request. So we know that that's the error message. And there is the one with the red, which is different. Now you see that the difference is not too big, so that's like 25 bytes, no, 125 bytes. But you don't want to go, sometimes it's just 2 bytes and 3 bytes, and you don't really want to go and figure out yourself what the difference was. So here comes the other tool which we are looking at in this video, and that is the comparer. So what we can do, we can send requests to the comparer and surprisingly compare them. So we can choose this this baseline request and say right click here and send to comparer, and you see that we have now this request here. And then let's go back to the intruder and say to this response as well, send to comparer. Now on the top you choose the first request, and in the bottom you choose the second, and you have two options to compare them by words or by bytes. Usually we're using the words because to compare by bytes you need to be really hardcore to figure out anything from the bytes. And usually it's because we are talking about HTTP plain text protocol, it makes sense to look at it in words. So let's check out in words. You get this nice window, one side one request, other side other request, and which is also a cool feature, say sync view. So what I'm going to do, I will just scroll down and look for these colors, and if we see some colors, then we'll see that there is some difference there. Okay, so we found the difference. And so you look at it here, it says this is the error message because it says incorrect response for WebGoat, please try again. And the other one, you see here that there is no message. And here, for security reasons, please change your password immediately. Okay, all right, that seems really promising. So if we want just to go back to another thing we used before, which I usually do, just to look at the response in the browser to really see what that is. And for that, you can say show response in browser. And then as always, we need to copy this URL and come back to the browser and paste the URL. And now, just to make sure, in this case, the request wasn't sent again. Just Burp shows you the response in your browser. So when I loaded this page, no request was sent to the server. And yeah, you can see here that in this case, when the payload was red, then we actually got through, and uh, we got all these data here, like the username, color, and then the password. So it's pretty cool. We actually cracked this forgot password functionality. We can come back and try it ourselves. So username webgoat, submit, answer red. And then we got here what we've already seen. Password is webgoat. So that's great. That's how more or less you use the intruder. One more thing I want to show you. I just close this window and go back to the intruder. In the options tab, there are quite a few things what you can customize. A few things here is the request engine. As I said, you cannot change this in the free edition, but in the pro edition you can use different threads, and you can set set throttle and stuff like that. It can speed up your test, but for instance, if the targeted application has some kind of anti-automation measure, if it sees that there are lots of requests coming from the same place, then that might be an attack, and then starts rejecting requests. Then you can set it up here to make it slower, which won't be too good for you, because then the whole attack will be really slow, but it still goes through, so you can just let it go and do whatever else you want, and then when it's ready you come back and look at the results. And this grep match is also really interesting. You can set up here strings or regular expressions to look for in the responses. So we can just tick this checkbox here and say that flag results containing these expressions. You see it's usually, the default list here is usually part of default error messages like exception, error, SQL, things like that. Or that's also Oracle error message. And now if you do our attack again with the same payload, start attack, okay. Then you see the difference here is that we have all these columns here, which says whether these expressions were found in the response or not. Now, in this particular case, it didn't help us, because you see red contained exactly the same expressions as everything else. But we could try something else. I come back here and add password, because if you remember, here there was this, or no, actually, I will look for password immediately. Let's try it. And yeah, that worked. So if you come here, you see that the second line is the red, and that's the only place where this password immediately string was found. So you can use this feature to not base everything on the response length, but also to look for something. So if you can figure out what could be unique on the page when your attack is successful, then you can put an expression there, and then you will immediately see if your attack was successful or not. The rest of the features here I don't really use often, so I won't talk about it right now. I suggest you to try it out sometimes, but my experience is that um, it doesn't come up uh, too many times that you need them. All right, one more thing I wanted to show is that if we come back to the comparer, I just to show you the bytes view, and then you can decide yourself if it's something what you want to look at it or not, or whether you want to use the words instead of the bytes. Yes, and we can scroll down here again, trying to find the difference. Oh, yeah, it was there. So here is our difference. Sometimes useful if you're using some kind of response request response body which is not plain text. It could be like Java objects or things like that. But most of the time, it's better to use the words feature. All right, that was the intruder and the comparer. I suggest to play it a little bit. You can try to solve some SQL injection here, like the string SQL injection, and use the intruder for that to play around a little bit. You can use the grep matching. Just try to make sure that you understand how the intruder works and how you can use it in a live scenario. That's all I wanted to say about the intruder. So thanks for watching.